Hey, how's it going? It's your Challenger Coach Adam Moriarty-Isles here with our newest Mobalytics tier list video for patch 9.20. For this tier list, we decided to tighten up our criteria for the S tier champions and had a second look at our champion difficulties. Let us know what you think about these changes in the comment section, and if you're interested in knowing more in depth about the changes that will impact this patch, check out our patch rundown in the video link below. So without any further delay, let's jump right into the tier list. Starting off for the top lane normal list, our S tier roster will be Teemo, Yorick, Garen, Urgot, Mordekaiser, Kled, and Heimerdinger. Garen will remain in S tier despite his changes, as many Garen players consider it to be a buff or at least net neutral. I'll be going more in depth into these in the patch note update video, so don't worry. That means that Nasus, Jax, and Illaoi are all moving down to A tier. Though all of these top laners are quite strong and can solo carry games, they all have major issues with blind picked while having a decent amount of meta matchups that make them lose agency on the game. Illaoi in particular definitely has this issue. Now, I know some top laners are thinking right now, dude, Illaoi stomps lane, she's broken, why move her down? To that I'd like to say, cause you're likely only playing melee top laners into Illaoi. Illaoi mains are gonna hate me for this one, cause I'm gonna tell you one easy trick on how to beat her, and the real reason why she's dropping down to A tier. Just pick a ranged top laner, it's that easy. She's got god-awful, unwinnable matchups into things like Teemo, Heimer, who are also S tier at the moment, and also Kayn, who is closing in on S tier quickly as more and more pro players attempt to play her, even on the world stage. Next up, our last changes, keeping with the theme of cutting down on worthy champions this tier list, we have Sion and Volibear moving down from A tier to B tier as they are struggling to deal with the ever-growing increase in mage top laners. Maybe Hishinshin was right all along, mages top lane are becoming a problem. On the other hand, a tank champion that isn't struggling in the current meta right now is Shen, who is my pick of the patch. Alright, now has Shen been my pick of the patch before? Yes, but likely no one remembers that anyway, so I'd like to mention him again, as he is one of the very few tank top laners that is viable on both the normal list and the High-ELO list. Shen used to be the definition of lose lane win game, but nowadays thanks to some damage buffs, he is able to beat a lot of popular bruisers like Renekton, Camille, Riven, or even other tanks like Cho, Ornn, and Malphite. The key to doing this is going in for poke when your shield and grass proc are up, followed by taunting in when you see the enemy waste CDs on minions, which, if you're against Riven, will be quite likely at some point in time. For items, try going Titanic Hydra first if you want to carry games, and look to use your ult to help people who are looking to make proactive plays like setting up picks or 1v1s rather than using it defensively to save people if you want to have more impact on the game. Starting off the top lane High-ELO list, our S tier roster is going to be Jax, Kled, and new additions Heimerdinger and Riven. Riven going to S tier shouldn't be too much of a surprise, as she has recovered from all the random number changes she's received over the last couple of patches, only to end up right back where she started. As who knew changing her CDs by 1 second at random would not stop her from flash one-shotting an entire team. If Riot really wanted to nerf Riven, they should look at hitting her damage number so she actually needs to rely on CDs coming back up rather than being able to kill people with half of her kit being used to gap close and the other half being used to delete your entire health bar. In her current state, Riven is definitely one of the premier solo queue champions for carrying. Mr. Dinger is also being sent to S tier thanks to the massive buffs he got last patch, and is even saying play at Worlds and even bans to validate his strength in the current melee-focused meta. That leaves us with a massive slaughter, Red Wedding style, of A tier champions being moved down, with Rumble, Teemo, Darius, Cassio, and Aatrox being moved down to Beatrox. The reason for this is we are being more strict with how we rank our High-ELO list in terms of the consistency and frequency at which these champions are being played and performed. That leaves us with Sion and Dr. Mundo being shadowed around as no one plays those champs to Challenger at the moment. And lastly, Kayn will be moving up to A tier as she's becoming more and more popular at high levels of play thanks to her laning phase not being complete trash anymore, so she actually gets a chance to scale. In the jungle, our starting S tier roster will be Amumu, Volibear, Dr. Mundo, Nunu, and Echo, which means that once again we cut a bunch of S tier champions including Jax, Vi, Nocturne, and Master Yi. The reason for this is not that these champions are terrible or got worse, because they all have fantastic win rates and play rates. Well, besides Master Yi, he actually started to get worse due to not being able to keep up with the gank heavy meta. Honestly, if they had these kind of stats in a role like bot lane, they would be god tier, but this is jungle, and it just goes to show you how much of a monster the current S tier champions are when Dr. Mundo is running around with a 54% win rate. It's like, why pick anything that is an S tier as a jungler at the moment, cause you're just giving yourself a 2% win rate handicap if you're not on Dr. Mundo, who is even starting to see some play in High-ELO, as despite being initially considered a low elo pick, he's doing pretty well there too. Now, with that rant being over, here's Flares, who is going to tell you why you should pick something that is an S tier, with his pick of the patch, Kayn, moving from B to A tier. He says that Kanye Jungle is his pick of the patch mainly because with the increasing popularity of Zac, Dr. Mundo, and Echo, red form Kayn can be easily stacked because of them being melee. Kayn has always been a solid choice, but due to the gank heavy meta, he hasn't had time to shine due to the fact that he doesn't become a champion until 10 to 15 minutes. However, because hyper tanks are seemingly becoming more and more popular at this level of play, Ross can easily slice them up with Red Smite Warrior and Black Cleaver to be an unkillable force to be reckoned with in the later parts of the game. That leaves us with some A tier changes. We got AP Rock Wizard Malphite moving up to A tier due to his ability to blow people up on one item without being good at the game. Then we got Hecarim moving down to B tier because he just isn't able to snowball as consistently anymore, and that champion sucks from even or behind. Oh, and before I forget, Ivern, the Janna of the jungle, is a champion, and he got buffed, so we're moving him to B tier. In the jungle High-ELO list, our starting S tier roster will be Karthus, Kha'Zix, Rengar, Nidalee, Echo, and Brolaf. Olaf is currently the go-to jungler for snowballing the early game. His insane early clear speed, ability to duel, invade, and come out on top in skirmishes really can't be matched during this phase of the game. Though he likely has one of the worst late games possible, this isn't a big concern for high-level junglers in solo queue because they just use their top-tier early game to end the game before it gets past 25 minutes, where he likely becomes about as valuable as a cannon minion and probably less useful than one with a Baron buff. This is why you see such a disparity in his high-elo ranking compared to his normal list one, since game times are much faster in Challenger, so he never reaches the point where he becomes useless. A tier got a lot of changes in it, mostly shifting things down to B tier, like Vi, Hecarim, Jarvan, who used to do quite well but are now not able to keep up with the high damage skirmish champions like Nidalee or Lee Sin. Graves will also be moving down to B tier as the buffs were not enough to help him escape B tier hell, while the experiment of Pantheon jungle is now over, sending him to the Shadow Realm as it really doesn't work that well and he's even getting nerfs to his Q. I'm sorry Flares, it's just not that good of a pick anymore. Warwick and Trundle are getting Shadow Realmed as well because no one wants to see those champions on their team in high-low games anymore, especially Trundle since he can't even be used to counterpick Sejuani anymore. Why you ask? Because no one's playing that champion in solo queue anymore either. For our mid lane S tier starting roster, we have Malzahar, Vel'Koz, Fizz, Swain, Mordekaiser, Echo, and Heimerdinger. That makes it so that Ahri, Lux, and Diana are being kicked out of S tier. This is because there is a clear line between their strength and things like Fizz, Heimer, who actually dominate mid lane at the moment, rather than just relying on being safe and getting carried like Lux or Ahri. Next up, we got Peckinwolf's pick of the patch, Ice Queen Lissandra. She's getting a pretty significant AP buff that will bring her back as a big teamfight menace. WR combos are going to feel that much better with this buff, and when people start falling to your passive Icy Ghost, you're going to feel good about it. Runes, you can go Aftershock, Demolish, Bone Plating, Overgrowth, and you can also go for Electrocute Primary if you feel like being a carry. For items, you should go Lost Chapter into Protobelt, then Sork Boots, Ludens, Zanya's, Oblivion Orb into Deathcap Void Staff, depending on which one you need, and for maxing, you should max Q, then W, then E at the moment. When playing Lissandra, you want to look for big engages with your E into Flash W ult yourself combo when your team is nearby. And then you can just watch the LP roll in as she is a perfect champion to counter melee heavy comps, so we predict her win rate to go up to around 50 to 51%. It would be higher, but her QCD still is just terrible early game. That leaves us with the biggest change to mid lane going to Victor. Not only is he getting some quality of life changes to his ultimate, allowing him to travel over terrain or follow people while he's dead, kind of like Annie Tibbers, but he is also getting an insane buff to his W augment. It is now going to slow people for 20% when he hits them with his Q or his E, allowing him to skip building rallies altogether, which has been a fairly core item for him for a long time now. With the slow kicking in much earlier than it would if he had actually built rallies and having an extra item slot available in the early game, we predict him to jump to A tier or at the very least B tier, so remember to tune back in for the update video next week to find out where he lands. I'm pretty sure the 5 Victor mains that remain, including the one that always posts in our YouTube comments, are going to be pretty happy about these changes. For our starting S tier roster on the High-ELO mid list, we have Talon, Katarina, Qiyana, and LeBlanc. LeBlanc comes in almost out of nowhere as people remembered that this is an early game skirmish meta, and yeah, she's pretty good at that. Though she has had some late game teamfighting issues in the past, currently people pick a lot of squishy champions, so even during the mid to late game, she has a lot of targets to poke out or pick off, so it's not as big of an issue. The main draw from LeBlanc though is of course her laning phase gank assist, as it's incredibly easy to set up ganks for junglers like Lee Sin or Nidalee, then roam around with them for a 4-man bot dive into the enemy team spamming open mid and all chat while still actively playing the game, but staying in there just to continue to complain. I'm not gonna lie, playing against LeBlanc right now when she's got an early game jungler that can snowball is so difficult. Besides LeBlanc though, we got changes to Orianna and Ahri, who are going down from A tier to B tier, who despite being known as consistent champions are consistently mediocre at high level solo queue at the moment. At least Orianna is still a decent pick and competitive though after her buffs. As for Qiyana, she did receive some nerfs, but we predict that they won't really impact her that much, at very least not enough to drop her out of S tier. After such a long time though, Ryze has returned to the tier list and goes straight to A tier. As is tradition during Worlds, everyone practices Rise and figures out he's actually not as bad as what they initially thought if he masters, and then his popularity skyrockets and people start spamming him at high-level solo queue quite a bit. I normally don't condone this pick, but okay, I'll admit he's doing a lot better this time around. That means if you used to be a Rise picker, you can try him out again, it's safe. Let's head over to the bot lane with our starting S tier roster being Jinx, Ashe, Jhin, Caitlyn, Yasuo, and Hewitt's pick of the patch, Heimerdinger. Heimer has been a menace ever since his buff last patch. He's so strong that he's even seeing regular competitive play. The obvious difference is that his turrets scale much harder with the increased AP ratio. This makes him an amazing champion at securing objectives and putting out DPS during teamfights. The less obvious strong buff is the increased stun duration on his grenade. We all know that stun duration is good, but Heimer's grenade can be a bit unreliable to land against mobile and ranged champions. However, in a melee-heavy meta, Heimerdinger has an easier time consistently landing the sweet spot on his grenade. Not to mention the increased stun duration works with his upgraded grenade, which gives him an insane boost to his AoE CC in teamfights. Mr. Dinger can be played effectively in 3 different roles: top, mid, and AD carry. Please don't jungle him. Getting good at him now will not only give you results on your main role, but it will give you a nice flex pick if you get off-rolled. We have 2 changes to the list this time around, the first being to Miss Fortune, who was unlucky enough to fall out of S tier to A tier. Despite being at the top of our list for such a long time due to her ease of execution and AoE teamfight ability, the current meta has far too many supports who can easily lock her down and kill her. Now you might be thinking, aren't some of the other S tier champions immobile and easy to kill from hook champions, like Jinx or Ashe? Yeah, that's definitely true, but at the very least, those champions have insane late games to back up them feeding in the laning phase, or they have the DPS to actually kill those engaged supports if they screw up, while Miss Fortune can't do that as effectively because she's mostly a poker burst-oriented champion. There is no way Miss Fortune is going to be able to kill an Aftershock, Leona, or Nautilus, but Ashe can certainly run them down after Aftershock wears off as they waddle away slowly and die to her arrows and consistent damage. Our second change is Draven moving down from S tier to A tier, and it's mostly due to us cleaning up our criteria for S tier. Though we believe he is still a very powerful champion in the hands of highly skilled one-tricks, he just runs it down if you aren't one of those players. Well, let me take that back. It's just that he does it more often unintentionally if you haven't mastered him yet. So, moving Draven down is mostly due to his inconsistency at lower levels of play, which is why we don't want him in S tier anymore. Heading over to our High-ELO S tier starting roster, we have Caitlyn, Kai'Sa, Heimerdinger, Draven, and new arrivals Ashe and Lucian. We are moving Ezreal up from B tier to A tier as people have readjusted to his new build after the AP nerf, so now, with that out of the way, let's talk about S tier stuff. Heimer will be moving to S tier for the same reasons explained in Hewitt's pick of the patch, while Ashe is moving up due to her buffs last patch, allowing her to bully lane more consistently. Lucian is the biggest change, coming from B tier to S tier. This mostly comes from the fact that in this meta you need to snowball early and skirmish well, which Lucian has always excelled at. But the issue for him has always been that he scales horribly, especially during his Black Cleaver second phase, and if the games didn't end quickly, he was pretty much useless. More recently though, people have abandoned that build and either go Bork into Essence Reaver followed by more crit items, or just full crit with Essence Reaver followed by IE Rapid Fire, but in either case, these builds give Lucian a lot better scaling. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't going to make him Vayne levels of late game, but he is at the very least not going to be the Olaf of the AD carry world anymore, and he can be relied upon to be useful in the later stages of the game. Next up, we have the support starting S tier roster of Soraka, Nautilus, Blitzcrank, Janna, Nami, Swain, and Pyke. Funny enough, nothing actually moved up this patch for support, we only moved champions down, starting with Brand going from S tier to A tier. This happened because of 2 specific things colliding. The first being that Brand support has the highest average deaths per game out of any support, and almost the highest out of any champion in the game. And the second one is that it's in a meta where Leona is played, and every single hook champion is insanely strong, including Blitzcrank, who is still going to be S tier despite his nerfs. That pretty much means that Brand is going to feed on an even more consistent basis, as he will be constantly engaged on during the laning phase. Now, this doesn't mean that he will fall all the way to B tier, for example, as he can still do his whole combo before he dies and out DPS his ADC, but it's not a good time to be mage supports in general right now. Which is also the reason why we moved Vel'Koz down to B tier from A tier, Annie to the Shadow Realm, and even Rakan from A to B tier, as he has tough times versus Nautilus, Blitzcrank, and Leona, so his ability to be blind pick got hurt quite a bit. Taric will be our last change to the support list, moving him from A tier to B tier, as this isn't a scaling meta, and he's got no presence in the lane, at least compared to a champion like Leona, who will be Will's pick of the patch. He says that Leona is his pick of the patch due to her being one of the only viable supports that can hold her own against Blitzcrank. Unlike most of the other S tier supports, they all struggle against Blitzcrank in some way or another. While Blitz can definitely beat her, his effectiveness is definitely reduced versus Leona. Leo is really good into mage supports like Zyra or Brand, and she is really good into enchanters like Sona or Nami. She is one of the better blind pick supports out there at the moment, and she doesn't have that many bad matchups. Just ban Morgana and you'll be fine. Last up, we have our high-low S-tier support roster of Jhin, Rakan, Thresh, Pyke, and new addition, Nautilus. Nautilus is back in S-tier as hook champions are in this season, and he's one of the best. Not only is he incredibly tanky with strong roaming, but there's barely any outplay potential. Kinda like how Thresh walks up to you with Mobies and then flays you into a box hook combo, Nautilus can do the same thing. He just walks up, auto-attacks you, and then hits you with a million other pieces to CC. Or he hits you with the ult into hook combo, giving him a lot of pick options with very little counterplay unless you play Morgana, which won't be available because every single Nautilus player bans it every game. The other unique thing about him compared to the other engage supports or hook champions is that once he engages, he actually has a way to get out of teamfights. If his hook CD comes back up, which likely it will with all the CDR he built, he'll actually be able to escape the teamfight when it starts to go badly. Despite the fact that he engaged perfectly, it was just the fact that his teammates didn't follow up properly. The rest of the changes to the list include Taric going from A tier to B tier for the same reasons as on the normal list, along with Sona, Alistar, and Zyra being cleaned up and sent to the Shadow Realm as they are pretty weak at the moment, and solo queue at the very least. Personally, I think at this level of play, if you blind pick Sona, you're pretty much trolling, as you are very likely to int the laning phase versus any of the popular engaged champions with no room to scale and recover. Thanks again for watching our tier list video for patch 9.20. Feel free to ask us any questions in the comments below for us to answer in the next Q&A video next week. We did decide to do some big changes to the list post Worlds patch, so let us know what you think about them, and as always, be sure to check out Mobalytics.gg.